All right, and I'll share my screen again and we'll get our presentation underway. We're no longer before we begin. Now we are beginning. So thank you all again for joining us for Taking Pictures for Science, our introduction to iNaturalist and the CityNature Challenge. Today we'll be talking a lot about the iNaturalist app. Hopefully some of you have checked it out a little bit. You might have already been familiar even before our program today, and you may have downloaded it in advance of today's program. We are going to have a short break in the middle of the program where you will be invited to try out iNaturalist, give it a trial run. So if you don't already have it on your device and you are a great multitasker, please go ahead and see if you can download it. You will need to make a free account. But if you don't have it or you need assistance with trying to get it onto your smart device of choice, then we can certainly help you out with that too during our brief interlude in the middle of the program. We will have our chat window available today. Depending on how your screen is configured, you might see a bubble to open the chat on the top navigation bar or the bottom navigation bar, and you're welcome to just type any comments or questions in there as we are going along. But when you are not speaking, please do keep your microphone on mute. We will also have times where you will be welcome to speak with your voice if you would like to ask questions directly. So our program goals include becoming familiar with the CityNature Challenge, our upcoming science event we're very excited about, and bioblitzes, of which the CityNature Challenge is one. We also hope you're going to learn how to use iNaturalist to observe things around you in nature, to explore and learn more about the things you're seeing, and that you will learn how your observations and photos you take are beneficial for science and research. And we also hope that you're going to get so excited about community science and the CityNature Challenge that you join us in this awesome remote 4-day event that's going to be happening next week. Do any of you have your own particular goals for today's program? If you do, please share them in the chat. I'd love to know. Jess, do you have any of your own goals beyond this?
I really want to see a turtle, but I always want to see a turtle. So, and Brian now knows that I'm obsessed with salamanders, but I'm not going to the mountains because I want the coast to win.
Mm-hmm.
So,
agreed.
Friendly competition.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a representative from one of the other North Carolina aquariums. Rana Paris here is an educator at the North Carolina Aquarium on Roanoke Island. So it definitely makes sense to me that one of her goals for this program is to have Roanoke's CityNature Challenge programs be even more fun and successful. So community science might be something that you've heard about before, or maybe you've heard of it as citizen science, but it's an idea that I think is really well encapsulated in this picture. It's the idea that science is not a process that has to occur in a laboratory or in a university or in the field with really high-tech equipment. That science is an investigative process that belongs to the whole community, and that all kinds of members of the community can drive this process and can come up with questions that we want to answer with data and participate in collecting data to answer questions that are really valuable to us and important to learn more about. So the idea of community science or citizen science is that it's either a scientific or research project, some kind of scientific question that professional scientists are trying to answer with help from the public in collecting information and data, or that it is some kind of scientific project where community members who are not professional scientists, but just are interested in learning more about a certain topic, have come up with a research question and are driving the project themselves or ourselves by working together to collect information from our environment. And this lends itself really, really well to all kinds of studies in the realm of nature, the environment, and biology, as we're going to learn. So the CityNature Challenge is a specific project, it is not in and of itself a community science project, but it does collect a lot of information that helps a ton of different community science projects and provides data to them. So the CityNature Challenge is not trying to answer any of its own questions. It doesn't have any specific research goals, but it is a worldwide event that is meant to help get people really excited about participating in community science and to help people explore and observe more of and learn more about your immediate surroundings and the nature you can find right wherever you are. Now, the CityNature Challenge is a global bioblitz. So a bioblitz is a project where a group of people are working together to document as many different kinds of plants and animals as they can in a specific area. The global part of this bioblitz, though, is that countries around the world, more than 150 this year, I think, I'd have to double check the number, are each setting up their own bioblitzes in their own locations. And this awesome challenge, this is not even this year's map. This is a map from 2020, I believe, of the cities participating. But this challenge began several years ago as just a regional competition between a museum in San Francisco and a museum in Los Angeles, where educators there who really loved urban nature got a little bit frustrated that people have a hard time realizing how many species of animals and plants are all around us all the time, even in the middle of a dense city. So they set up a challenge between these two cities. I'm not from the West Coast, so I didn't know there was a rivalry between these two cities until I learned about the CityNature Challenge, but apparently the rivalry is fierce. So they decided to set up a challenge to see which city could find more species of living things in the city limits than the other in 4 days. And it went really well. The next year, they invited other cities to join in. And beyond that, they made it a global challenge. And here we are today, several years later, and with all of North Carolina represented in the challenge. So the goal of the CityNature Challenge is to have as many people as possible make as many observations. So the language here, observation, just means one instance where you saw a living thing at a particular place and a particular point in time. To have as many people as possible, make as many observations as possible of as many species of living things as we can. And there's also a fun competitive element. All the different cities and regions around the world are competing against each other to have the most of each of these things. Now, North Carolina's participation in the CityNature Challenge goes back almost to the beginning. The Triangle area was the first set of cities in North Carolina to join the challenge. And then since we have picked up Western North Carolina, the Charlotte Metro, the Piedmont area around Greensboro, and the coastal plain of North Carolina, where our museum and aquariums are located and where we're representing this year, go Coastal NC. So we'll be competing against other regions in North Carolina. And if we do have people joining in from those other regions today, you are also welcome. We're thrilled for your region's success. And we also want to see if we can represent North Carolina's awesome wildlife and biodiversity on a global scale. North Carolina gets represented pretty well in the top counts. The Triangle area is often in the top like 20 cities globally for the total number of observations and for the total number of species that they find. But if we can get all of North Carolina in the top 20, or maybe even push one of our regions into the top 10 in the world, that would be incredible. Now, the CityNature Challenge this year is from April 29th through May 2nd. It is 4 days, a Friday through a Monday. And if you want to help us in our goals with this challenge, all you have to do is use the free iNaturalist app or the iNaturalist web version to take pictures of plants and animals that you find, and also fungi, basically anything that is or was alive. You can upload your pictures through the iNaturalist app that shares them so that scientists and other naturalists and nature nerds in your area can see your observations if you allow them in the settings. And then once you have shared them on the website, the iNaturalist app is going to help you identify the things you find, and other members of the community are also going to help you with identifying your very cool discoveries. So it's very easy. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the wheel over to Jess now so she can walk you through a little bit of what iNaturalist is as a platform and how it works for you as a user and for the CityNature Challenge.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. So what I'm going to talk about, as Morgan said, is what is iNaturalist and kind of how to use it. And then we'll give you a little bit time to practice, but we'll get there. So iNaturalist is a very popular nature app that there's over a million users around the world that use this app, as well as the web-based format. All these plants and animals, and like Morgan said, anything that was living or is living, you can contribute to iNaturalist. On the screen, you can see on the left is what the app looks like. I believe on an Android phone, it's available on Android and Apple devices. And on the right is what it looks like, the main screen of the web version. Today, we'll mostly be talking about the app version, but you're more than welcome to ask us questions about the website as well. So iNaturalist was originally started as a master's final project of 3 students from the UC Berkeley School of Information. It's a joint venture by the California Academy of Scientists and the National Geographic Society. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, this app is available for Android and Apple devices. And on this screen, the one on the left is what the app will look like to you when you're looking at your own observations. Your observations are any of those plants or animals, or even recordings. You can record sounds of bird calls or frog calls, things like that. That's what it would look like on the app. The one on the right is a map, is the Explorer version of the app. And what you can do is you can zoom in or zoom out as far as you want. And all of these markers or circles will pop up and it'll show you different observations that were found in that area. For instance, this is showing most of New Hanover County and showing observations that were found. The colors they stand for different organisms. Green are plants, blue are animals, and red is fungi and insects. And the circles and the markers mean something a little different that I'll talk about later. So I don't want to go into that right now, but if you have a question about it, you're more than welcome to ask. So next slide, please. So how does iNaturalist work? Basically, you're going to take a clear picture of an observation of a plant, of an animal. In this one, you can see it's a coral honeysuckle. So this user took a picture of the coral honeysuckle, and you would take that picture, upload it to iNaturalist. iNaturalist will give you a suggestion for the ID if you're not sure of it, because this database has millions of different people that have been uploading things for years. And so it has enough built in that it kind of knows what that object or plant or animal could be. So on the second screen, it says, what did you see? View your suggestions. And you'll see it says honeysuckles on the other part, and you pick that from the list of what you think. You don't have to get the exact species. You can even do the kingdom if you want to go as far as that, or you can go to the genus or any of the taxonomic categories there. I do want to mention a couple other settings that you can use on iNaturalist. So on the middle screen, you can see that orange oval is circled. So what you want to make sure you want to do is make sure you have a date and a time in there, and also a location. You don't have to have, you can do something called obscure your location, which means that you can hide it from the general public knowing. For instance, if you were at your house and you saw something at your house that you wanted to take a picture of, and you don't want to disclose your address to people, you can obscure that, and it will not show it to the general public, but it will show it to the scientists in iNaturalist so they know where the observation is in the world. And then another setting on here is called captive or cultivated. So for your observations to be research grade, which is something I'll talk about in a few slides, it has to be a wild organism. That's mostly what iNaturalist was created to do. But you can take pictures of captive animals. For instance, if you wanted to take a picture of your pet, you could, or a cultivated plant, a plant that is not wild. That will automatically turn on if it is subjected, if they think that it is captive or cultivated. And once you've done all of those things, I know that was a lot all in one thing, but you'll get used to it once you do it over and over again. Once you do all of that, you hit share and it uploads it to that database. Next slide, please. All right, so if anybody has any questions before you go out and practice, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I want to give you about 5 minutes to go and practice iNaturalist so you can get a feel for it. So I want you to go outside if you can, take a picture of a plant, animal, anything you would like, anything living or was living, and then come back and share it with us if you'd like to.
And if you're in a position right now where you're not going to be able to go outside at the moment, but maybe you have access to a houseplant or a domestic animal that's in your space, feel free to try this out on them too. Just make sure that you pay attention to that captive cultivated flag. We don't want to accidentally say that any of our houseplants are wild things thriving in nature here and confuse any botanists who might be using this data.
And we'll give you about 5 minutes. And I guess when you get back, just either tell us that you're back or put it in the chat so we know to keep going.
Quick question, how do you download it into iNaturalist? Or do you have to take a picture with iNaturalist through iNaturalist?
Okay, so if you already taken the picture, is that what you're saying? So I do that a lot. I've
got it pulled up.
So in iNaturalist, yeah, if you, Morgan, if you want to
share and pin myself for a second, we'll see if you can see it.
So you go into iNaturalist and you look for the photo.
Yeah. The text is not going to show here. This is not an optimal setup. I wish I had a screenshot, but when you do click to make an observation,
I don't know if mine
you can either select to take a new photo, it'll have a camera icon, or you can choose a photo that's already in your photo library. So yes, if you're not able to go outside, that's an excellent choice too.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to both Rana and Veronique for asking that question.
Another thing I'm noticing is that if you have a phone, it gives you a vertical, a very long skinny. And when you get to iNaturalist, it gives you a square. And so I've cut off the bottom of my leaf.
Yeah, so that's one advantage to taking it directly through the app. And then another one is that if you turn the location services on your device, it will automatically capture that, and then you can just decide to obscure it. If you use a photo that you've previously taken, then you kind of have to use that map. There's an option to, when you click on the location, to use the map to try to find, as close to where you took that picture as possible.
Okay, thanks.
It won't automatically just know where you took that picture. I'm hoping they'll be able to do that soon because that metadata is already captured in most smartphone pictures. So that might be an update soon.
Brian, interestingly, on some people at the aquarium's accounts who have downloaded the app really recently, I have seen that it automatically fills the metadata from photos that they already have. I think I have the capture location data in photos setting turned off on my phone, so I don't get that benefit, but it's a lot better when it automatically knows the location and you don't have to scroll on the little map for forever. That's my iNaturalist pet peeve.
Another thing that I think we're we're trying to get our folks to do is to have it sent to, I guess, a folder that is specific to our aquarium grounds.
Yeah, we have some projects set up, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail here soon.
Okay. And if it wasn't able to find my location, any ideas for that? I'm inside the building, so I probably can't find me.
Inside your concrete bunker, it can't locate you?
Jeez, I know, it's like, you want to see my my cinder block is right behind here. Look at that. So if you can't find the location, can you still use it, or do you have to kind of plug in something?
If it doesn't have a location and it won't connect to the cell service enough to let you set a location on the map that it has, you can still submit an observation. You can edit it later, either in the app or on the web version, to add a location after the fact. But for observations that don't have a location will not get counted as research grade. They're not going to be used for science because the location is usually the data scientists are most interested in. And it also will have a little bit of a negative effect on how accurate iNaturalist species ID suggestions are. That algorithm is tied into what has been seen near you to a certain degree.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else has trouble, but our visitor login network is like.
Yep, welcome everyone, and please, please, please do add seashells. There are dozens of species of cool marine animals that we can document by their seashells. That's oftentimes not the still living animal, but it's great evidence that they are here and using our nearby ecosystems. So especially if you're going to be participating in the CityNature Challenge, that's a really cool way, documenting seashells, to add a lot of different species to our regional list and your personal list.
Yep, anything that was living or once living, or anything that came from an animal, you can take pictures of and upload.
So if you find just one feather on the trail, you can also make an observation of that and say it's evidence of a bird.
Or tracks, or even scat. You can upload
Scat's not as
things
glamorous, but it is a great indicator. Sometimes you can be very accurate in identifying what animal left that behind.
Exactly.
Can you go back and obscure the location setting? I had a little one click my phone while I was uploading, so we didn't quite get there.
Yes, so you can edit.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you go back to the screen where you can look at your observations, then you can tap on that, and then there should be an edit option, and then you can obscure and do all those things. You can even change the location if you made a mistake and you need to update that location or something.
A great point with seashells and with anything, if you're uploading something away from the place where you originally saw it, double check that the location is where your observation came from. A lot of the time you'll see seashell observations that people post in Raleigh that clearly came from their trip to the beach, but the seashell itself was not an animal that originated in Raleigh. So the location is meant to be where the thing was found. Jess, how are we doing on time on our 5-minute timer?
We're about at 5 minutes. Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back everyone. And then let's go ahead and resume our presentation, unless there's anyone who would like to share a little bit about what you took a picture with, or a picture of, or what picture you used in iNaturalist, and how you feel about any ID suggestions it gave you. Yeah, Day, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for doing this, Morgan, and I'm really glad that I jumped on. I'm at the ferry because it's been filling up lately, so I'm leaving a little bit earlier. So I saw this bird and it had like duck-like feet and it had like snowy feathers that I'd never seen before. So I took a picture of it and I loaded it and it was right here in the road. I was worried that maybe it was hurt because it didn't even move when I moved my car up, but it did. It started moving when I started taking pictures of it. So it gave me a couple of options, but I didn't think any of them looked like this bird. You probably even know what I'm talking about, but so I just picked whatever they had there, and then I guess they have to determine what it is.
Yeah, that's a great thing about iNaturalist, is that even if the computer doesn't know what it is for sure, and even if you don't know, other users can come and they can share their experience with you. So I will go and check our local observations on iNaturalist once our program is over and see if I can figure out that bird mystery for you. One thing with the iNaturalist suggestions is iNaturalist can only use one picture at a time on that suggestion to represent the species. And there are a lot of animals and plants that look extremely different at different times of year and different times of the life cycle. So sometimes you look at that first suggestion and it doesn't seem like a match based on your own pictures or what you're looking at. But if you go further into the app and try to check out more information about that species, sometimes digging a little deeper, you realize it's a better match than you thought it was. Did anyone else want to share about one of your IDs?
Yeah, I already found that observation day of a gull, some sort of gull, and it says large-headed gulls as the observation. So that is perfect because that gets people who know about gulls close enough. So if you know about gulls, and you're on iNaturalist making identifications, then that's a great place to start. It's way better than just saying bird. You know, it gets you down into the area where people who know what they're talking about can get that specific identification. It's a great picture too. Fills the whole screen. Anyway, it's a great observation.
Way to go, Day. All right, let me bring us back to our presentation screen.
Okay, so as we kind of mentioned that iNaturalist is a global database of all of these things that you have observed. So once you upload a photo, it turns into a data point for scientists, and it's a way that scientists can they can use that data to see species ranges. They can they're studying biodiversity and different things like that. There are scientists that they can't be all around the world. They could be studying one bird that migrates all around the world, and they want to know, where is it turning up? It could be turning up in Wilmington, North Carolina, like a painted bunting does. And there could be somebody in South America that is studying that bird and sees, oh, well, that bird showed up in Wilmington, North Carolina, like it does every summer. So that's one thing that's super cool about iNaturalist. And then on the next slide, please. So there is something called research grade observations. And there's a couple things that you have to do to make it research grade. And what research grade means is that it will be, the scientist then will be able to see it, and that it has to have two people have a consensus of the identification. So it looks like Brian here made an observation of an eastern mud snake. And at first he thought maybe it's mud snakes. And then there was somebody that said mud snake. And then somebody else goes down and says eastern mud snake. Once there are two people that agree with that genus and species of the snake, then, and as well as the location, time and date, and as well as being a wild organism. It has to be a wild plant or animal. The location, time, and date have to be on there, and there has to be at least two people that agree on that identification to make it a research grade. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about that before I give it back to Morgan?
One thing that this points out, Jessica, that
Yeah.
I thought would be kind of neat to highlight is that it shows the time of when people chimed in on this. So this particular snake species was exciting to people. So you saw like basically the same day that I posted it, someone else said, oh yeah, that's a mud snake. And then the same day, somebody else said, oh, that's an eastern mud snake. And then the next day I checked in on that observation after doing some research, and I was like, yeah, I agree, it's an eastern mud snake. And so depending on what your observation is, you can get some pretty timely feedback, which is really fun because it's a fun way to learn about something that you may not know anything about before. And not all of these happen like this, but iNaturalist will give you notifications if you choose when you get updates on your observations.
Yeah, you can get email notifications, or you can get notifications on the website. Even Brian said those people came back like within a day or even a couple hours. I've had ones that recently, there was one that saw my observation from months ago, and then they put their own 2 cents in about what it was. So it's not just a right now thing. It's really cool. It's almost like a game to me. I go back and I'm like, oh, somebody thought it was that. That's pretty cool. So that's why I enjoy taking pictures of different things. And I enjoy having a friendly competition with Morgan. And I guess now Brian too. But yeah, we will see.
One of my favorite things to note about this instance of community identifications is that I personally recognize both of the usernames of the people on here that helped Brian identify the snake as users who have helped identify a bunch of my amphibian and reptile pictures in the past. So there are a lot of really, really dedicated volunteers just helping other people with IDs on their free time for the love of nature and the love of sharing how awesome their favorite plants and animals are. And you get to know some of them, and some of them are actually world experts, especially for seashells. One of the literal leading world experts on seashells of the eastern seaboard is a very, very, very active shell identifier on iNaturalist. So the amount of expertise that you can access through this app is really mind-boggling to me, and it's super cool. So once you do manage to get your observation to research grade, if it gets there, and it doesn't have to get to research grade to still be valuable to you and to other people. Even things that are casual observations hold a lot of value themselves. But the information that does make it to that research grade designation becomes available to scientists around the world in a couple of ways. First, a lot of the information can just be accessed by the general public by doing some searches through the observations on iNaturalist. So anyone who is interested in some information can get it. But information that is shielded for privacy concerns behind like a obscured observation filter or a private observation filter, and also animals and plants that are endangered, where iNaturalist intentionally hides their locations from regular users to protect them from poaching and from other human-based threats. These kinds of things, their information, when they become research grade, gets added to certain global biodiversity databases. So the GBIF is one of the big ones. I regretfully don't actually remember what it stands for, but it's Global Biodiversity something or other. And once it's in these databases, scientists can pull the information down and do a lot of really cool, really complicated statistical analysis on it to try to answer a lot of important questions. One of the easiest things that iNaturalist data can help with for research is understanding species ranges and how they are changing over time. iNaturalist is a really, really good way, especially for wildlife managers and for people who manage preserved lands like state and national parks, to understand which animals and plants are currently living in the places that they are in charge of, so they know how to protect that biodiversity and how best to manage the lands they're in charge of to preserve the biodiversity they do have. It's also really great for tracking where species are losing habitat due to maybe land use changes and development, and also especially monitoring how species ranges are responding to changing climates. So you can see on iNaturalist shifts in some animals' habitats over time and see them in places being observed in places where previously range maps would not have indicated that they lived, and sometimes surviving and being observed by average iNaturalist users all around the world at much, much further northern locations that you might have expected them to be. So this is a really great way for tracking all kinds of changes in where things are actually living and thriving. I think for me, the use of iNaturalist data for research that I think is the coolest and the most personally interesting is in studies of phenology, that second bullet point here on this slide. Phenology is a study of cycles in nature. So especially things that are cycling over the course of the year, changes related to the seasons, changes throughout the course of the year in plant and animal behaviors and life cycles. And iNaturalist is a really incredible source of data for people who are studying how the phenology, how the timing of these cycles of plants and animals is changing in response to changing climates. That's not just changing temperatures in certain areas, but that's also how they're responding to changing amounts of precipitation, how they are responding to unusual and severe weather patterns and weather disasters. There have been projects on iNaturalist studying how the severe 2020 wildfires in Australia have impacted plants growing in the places those wildfires occurred. But these studies can help to pinpoint how we can actually see in the organisms around us the impacts of climate change. And one of my favorites was studying huckleberries, which are a plant that's found all throughout the United States and up into Canada, and studying the times of year that they first start blooming, the earliest point in the spring that they bloom. This is really important because huckleberries are a big wild food source for people and for animals. The berries are really nutritious for a lot of different species, from mammals to birds and beyond. And they're also a really important pollinator plant. They're one of the plants that many bees rely on early in the season for nectar and pollen when there isn't necessarily a lot of food available to them before the peaks of the blooms for lots of plants later in spring and over the summer. Now, in studying when pictures of huckleberries on iNaturalist were blooming and not blooming, they can track over time how the earliest bloom dates have changed, and they can also project into the future how they expect them to change. And one research paper I found, they estimated that huckleberries might start blooming over a month sooner in the year in 50 or 100 years, or by the end of the century. Now, the really big question, if we can see how these changes are happening, is do other things respond to the changes? Are the bees who rely on these for food also going to be coming out at the time that they're blooming and the food is available? And we don't know, but everyone who is taking observations on iNaturalist is helping scientists to find the answers to these questions as they're emerging and developing. And finally, one other really great scientific application of iNaturalist information is studying how introduced species spread in new places where they're occurring. So iNaturalist is awesome for tracking the spread of potentially invasive species. You might have heard about, like, the spotted lanternfly is a really big pest problem in a lot of northeastern states. And showy insects, things that people are surprised to see or are unfamiliar with and have questions about, get posted on iNaturalist a lot. So a scientist who's really concerned about where are these new invasive insects that can be really damaging for our forests going, where are they spreading, how fast are they spreading? These things are things that iNaturalist is answering without anyone even being asked. People are just already supplying the data. And it's incredibly important for figuring out how to manage potentially really, really damaging and consequential invasive species spreads. So for our CityNature Challenge, if you do participate, you are going to be helping us to document all kinds of species we have in coastal North Carolina. I think our coastal biodiversity is awesome and is the coolest set of plants and animals in the state. So I hope that we'll be able to show that off and beat some of the other regions in our in-state competition this year. My aquarium is also going to be competing against Rana's aquarium. So we'll see whose aquarium can find the most stuff on our grounds this year. And we're also competing against the museum. So get ready, Jess and Brian. We're going to bring it. But it's not just taking pictures for science. There's also an identification week component to the CityNature Challenge. So if you want to help other people to identify what they find, that's a really important part of knowing how many species we did encounter during the challenge. And the ID week is immediately following the 4 days of observation, and it will show things in our iNaturalist project. So the way we track our progress during these competitions and how many species we're finding, how many people are participating, is with a project, which is just a page on iNaturalist that collects observations meeting certain criteria. So in our case, what we're interested in is collecting all of the observations people make in our coastal plain region in North Carolina, which includes a big number of coastal counties here, from New Hanover County all the way up to the Outer Banks and inland, basically to I-95, roughly thereabouts, and observations that happen during the 4 days of the challenge. So anything that meets those criteria is going to get automatically added into our project and counted towards our competitive totals. But if you do want to join the project so you can follow along with our progress and see what other people are finding more easily, the projects tab is accessible in the bottom right navigation bar of the app. And if you search, you can type in CityNature Challenge 2020 Coastal North Carolina and join the project so that you can see what other people are finding. And even if you aren't an expert on any kind of plants or wildlife in your area, you can still be really helpful for identifying, because as Brian mentioned earlier, people who spend a lot of time identifying specific things they have knowledge about often are searching and filtering for their areas of interest. So if I want to help identify things, I might go on iNaturalist and search for photos that other people have marked as snakes that need ID. Now, if I do that, anything that someone posted that doesn't have an identification, it's just left as unknown, is not going to show up. Or something that someone shared that is just marked as alive or reptiles would not show up. So you can go through other people's observations and just put something on them that's a little more specific. So you can start moving closer and closer to the species level ID from something as broad as unknown or it's alive, state of matter, life, through the ranks, to make it more likely that people who have the knowledge to provide a specific ID are going to come across that particular observation. And that about wraps up our program for today. So revisiting our goals, we hoped that through our presentation, you would become familiar with the CityNature Challenge and what bioblitzes are, learn how to use iNaturalist to make observations and understand why those observations matter for research and science. Hopefully you're excited about the CityNature Challenge and you want to participate. And if you had your own goals, I hope that those have been met too. So Rana, I see your hand is raised. What's up?
I was trying to figure out, do we want to have, should I join the CityNature Challenge 2022 Coastal, or should I join the specific one for Roanoke Island?
If it were me, I would join both.
Oh, can you post on both?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right.
Your observations will automatically go into both. So whatever project your observation qualifies for, it will be a part of. But when you follow both of those and join both of those through your account, then you'll be able to more easily, follow what's happening in those groups and see the other observations.
Okay, so let me make sure. So when I was looking at, trying to find the nearest one to me, it was doing Russia and all this kind of weird things. So as long as it's looking for something that would be found in my locale, it would go both in the coastal North Carolina as well as the Roanoke Island.
Yes,
all
as
right.
long as you put the location on your observation, then you're good. And you have to have a location for it to be useful for research anyways.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Day, you bet we're competing against the other aquariums. Rana, you're going down.
Oh, baby.
So So everyone who's not affiliated with the aquariums, if you are planning to visit one of the aquarium's locations or the Museum of Natural Sciences in Whiteville, visitor and volunteer IDs and observations also are going to help with our competition. But I think probably more importantly, setting our aquarium rivalries aside, we're all working together collectively to try to beat every other region in North Carolina. And last year, unfortunately, our coastal region came in last in North Carolina. So this year we really have to put on a good showing, you know, for my pride more than anything. I think that we have a very good chance of beating the Piedmont and the Charlotte Metro and possibly even the mountains too. So hopefully we can count on all of you, if you're in our region, to help us in our endeavors. If you're not in our region, to help promote the exploration of nature wherever you are. So if anyone has anything you'd like to say about if you think this presentation was helpful to you, if you think we met our goals for the program, please chime in. You also have my email, so if you would like to let me know after the program any of your thoughts or suggestions for the future, you are welcome to see that. And also on that link Brian just shared for the Science Across NC collaborative, that will give you links to more events all across the state that are focusing on the CityNature Challenge. And it's also going to give you some more links to interact with other people from your region, whether that's the coastal plain or another one. We do have a Facebook group for the coastal plain where we're also sharing some tips and tricks on how to make more observations and find more species hiding right under your nose where you've never noticed them before. And just for people to share what they do find that's really cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else discovers during the CityNature Challenge, both on iNaturalist and on that Facebook page. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end our recording here, but we will stay on the program for a few more minutes for more questions and friendly competitive banter with Rana. Thank you all so much for joining us for our Taking Pictures for Science presentation today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and hope to see your observations coming up soon in the CityNature Challenge 2022. Thanks, everybody.